Hey everyone, this is Nitro. So in this video, I'm going to talk about how to build Lanford. And Lanford, before I begin, I should say this flat out. Lanford is one of the more useful characters if you decide to play the strategist faction. Because that way, Lanford can be your melee character, Altemuller would be your tank, and Leon would be your cavalry unit, and then you could also have not Lana. You can have Luna as your bone knight, so as your ranged attacker, right? So that gives you I guess, the combination of character classes that you would need. And then there's also Vargas as your tank. And then if you need mages, you would usually combine strategists with dark. So you could bring Bozel or Lana, whenever you need ranged magic damage. So yeah, so basically, Lanford, if you have Leon, Lanford is 100% in his swordsman class. So he's going to be an infantry class rather than the cavalry class. With that said, you should probably unlock both classes because you will want the skills in both of these classes for Lanford to actually be useful. So he's one of those characters. Well, actually, really, any character you use, you want double class mastery on. But for Lanford, it's actually more important than most characters. So, let's talk about first his soldier boost. So the max soldier boost is 10% hit points, 40% attack, 40% defense, 10% magic defense. This is obviously an attack-oriented soldier boost. It's you get high attack, you get defense to keep your troops alive, and you get a bit of hit points in magic defense. But the bit of hit points does not give him that much survivability. So he is vulnerable to, I guess, magic attacks, which is really to be expected out of any magic attacker. So that's okay. Alright, so after the hero boost, let's talk about his talent. And his talent is that all allies within 2 blocks of him have their stats increased by a certain percentage. At 6 stars, it's 15% stat increase, which is huge, okay? All stats increased by 15%? That's like another faction buff, if you think about it. Faction buff is 20%. This is 15% to everything. So that's a very, very powerful talent when it's active. Which means as long as your other units are attacking within 2 blocks of him, it's going to be very nasty for the enemy. Alright. And his starting skill is actually one of his best skills. It's called shooting, I guess. And what it does is it attacks a single enemy, dealing 0.8 times damage. Now, that doesn't seem like much, but for each movement moved beforehand, before you attack, so it's like an assault, okay? For each tile you move, you get an additional 20% damage increase, up to 60% more. So basically, as long as you move 3 tiles in attack, you're doing 1.4 times damage with this skill. And in addition to that, after the battle, you can get a chance to move 2 squares. Okay, so you can attack and retreat. And finally, when you carry melee soldiers, the soldiers will also attack at the same time. So it's almost like it's like a combination of a lot of other skills, right? It has 2 range, this shooting skill. So in that sense, it's like Matthew's air slash with 2 range, right? It does more damage the more tiles you move, kind of like assault. And it lets you move after you attack. So, and that's always a great thing to have. So it's a great skill. I would say one of his core skills that you should always bring with you to every fight. Alright, so in terms of soldiers, he gets really a lot of cavalry, some flying units, some infantry, of course. From the training ground, he will get Heaven's Guard, Amazon Champions, which is nice because he can get Lancers, and Berserker, which is quite a powerful melee unit, to be honest. For a unit that you want to use for him, I would say it's either Amazon Champions occasionally, because you might need him to be doing Lancer attacks against Cavalry. Not likely, but it's possible. That's a nice choice. His bread and butter, I would say, is probably Berserker, because it increases the crit chance and they do additional damage, right? Their attack is increased. So it's really, he's your attacker, so you really want high damage, which means Berserker is a great choice. He could also use, of course, Heaven's Guard as well as Griffin Knight, so those are also very useful choices. In fact, Griffin Knight might be one of the better units for him, simply because, flying class is always quite powerful. But, it depends on the fight, right? I would say in general, you're probably likely to stick with Berserker, but if you have, let's say level 10 Griffin Knights, by all means use those instead. And then occasionally you might use Heaven's Guard. Again, only if you have Heaven's Guard at level 10. At this current stage, I don't think anyone will have Heaven's Guard leveling up because they're still focused on the other training grounds, but if you do have it, for certain fights where you're not facing very many Lancers, Heaven's Guard could be a possibility. But overall, I would say in general, you're more likely to use Berserker, Amazon Champions, or Griffin Knights. 1, 2, or 3. Alright, so that's it for his soldiers. Now, let's talk about his skills. And he actually has a very wide variety of skills. The thing is, the skills are all quite useful. First things first, his faction buff is a strategic faction buff, and what it does is, if you're using a mixed force where the heroes and soldiers' arms are different, the damage for the battle is increased by 15%. It's a nice buff, but frankly speaking, it's not as good as Altemuller's. Okay. Altemuller's buff overall is better, and in general, I would say you're more likely to bring Altemuller as your faction buffer, and I would actually not recommend bringing a faction buff with this character at all, Lanford, because it's too important for him to have chivalry with an attack skill. That's my opinion. Okay, so yeah, the bread and butter of Lanford, and the reason why Lanford is such a good character for strategists is because he has access to chivalry, right? This is the same skill that Leon has, giving him 30% attack increase, right? Immunity to all debuffs, blast, right? So that he takes less damage when attacking, and reinforcements where he heals after he attacks. So just a clutch skill, a very core skill for him. And the fact that you can move up, use chivalry, and move another 3 blocks as an infantry character is absolutely huge. If you use infantry characters like Bernhard and Elwyn, you know how often they struggle to get into attack range of the enemy. So the fact that there is now an infantry class character with chivalry is absolutely huge. Alright, so chivalry, core skill. And then I would say for your attack skill, you would probably bring shooting, because it gives him 2 rage to attack from. And then after he attacks, he can retreat back. So shooting, second core skill. And then for his 1-point skill, I would personally say you would probably pick defense break for the 1-point skill. Because defense break, before battle, there's a 50% chance to reduce the enemy's defense by 20%. So that would let you do more damage to the enemy, potentially one-shotting them. So that's why. Of note, I should also mention, he does have access to Roar, so he can dispel enemy buffs, right? So possibly useful if you're using him to fight Thunder Dragon. He's not as good as, let's say, Elwyn, because he doesn't have 2 attack skills to constantly remove buffs, but he does have Roar, which can help. And other than that, right, he also has a skill called Continuous Flash. This skill also does 1.4 times damage, and it does increase the crit rate by 20%. And when the enemy is successfully destroyed, the cooldown of the skill is reduced by 4 rounds. I'm not sure what the actual cooldown is in normal, maybe just 4 turns so that you can keep using it. And yeah, it's quite interesting because what it does is before the battle, you apply fixed damage on the enemy. And if you crit hit the enemy, after the battle, you do fixed damage to them again. So yeah, it's a skill that as long as you kill the enemy, you can keep using. Kind of like what Cherry has, let's say. So it's another very useful combat skill. Whether you choose between Continuous Flash or shooting is kind of up to you. In general, I would say shooting is better because of the attack and retreat factor, as opposed to Continuous Flash. But, continuous flash does let you keep using it turn after turn, so there is that. So in many ways, I guess the best explanation might be you would use shooting for PvP, and you would probably use continuous flash in PvE content, where you know you can one-shot targets, and so you can keep using the skill. Oh, actually, let me take something back. I said you should use Defense Break for your 1-point skill, but there is also Mind's Eye. Mind's Eye increases his crit rate by 15%, and after you land the crit hit in battle, the enemy's passive skills are disabled, which lasts 2 turns. So that's actually another very useful 1-point skill that Lanford has access to. Whether you choose Mind's Eye or Defense Break is kind of up to you, right? Mind's Eye, crit, more chance to crit hit, which does more damage. Defense Break, 50% chance to reduce the enemy defense to do more damage. So it's hard to say which one is better overall. If you're using continuous flash, absolutely Mind's Eye is better because of when the crit occurs, you do fixed damage after the battle. If you're not using continuous flash, you might consider Defense Break in combination with shooting. So, alright, so that covers his skills, the combos that you would use normally. And we've talked about his soldiers. So, let's now talk about Lanford's equipment. And to do that, I am going to jump to the Google Sheet. Alright, so Lanford in terms of equipment is pretty straightforward. He's not very different from the, other infantry characters, although his weapon is kind of unique. Let's begin with the weapon. For his weapon, he actually wants Frostrend, believe it or not. And the reason he wants Frostrend is because it has a 50% chance to reduce the enemy's mobility by 2 blocks for 1 turn. Well, because of the attack and retreat, if he can attack, reduce the enemy mobility by 2, reducing it to 1, and then retreat back 2 tiles, suddenly the enemy can't attack him. So Frostrend is probably his best weapon because of the chance to apply that debuff. You can attack and retreat. If the enemy survives, they can't attack you. Armors, well, in terms of armor, he is kind of flexible. The thing to note is, if you're going to use Lanford, he is going to be part of the strategist team, right? So the tank for the strategist team is Vargas, which does not protect against magic attacks. Thus, he is likely to take magic attack hits. And that means his best armors is probably either Aeolus's battle armor, which can reduce, ranged attack damage, or mirror armor, because mirror armor would deal damage to the enemy before a battle begins when he is attacked. So, take your pick. Aeolus's battle armor or mirror armor. I would probably say mirror armor for him is the better option, but Aeolus's battle armor would also work. Helmets? Well, I would personally say Vampire Mask for him, because he moves up, attacks, and then retreats. So being able to apply a potential debuff on the enemies to reduce their defense is always nice. Is there another option? Sure. I mean, you can't really go wrong with any of these helmets. I would say carbon fiber helmet is probably not a good option for him. He's not likely to take that much damage to get the attack buff. But yeah, you could give him Chief's helmet. You could give him Reaper's Breath potentially. You could give him Aeneas' helmet. And again, Aeneas' helmet is probably the worst helmet of these helmets that infantry class can equip. But yeah, and you could even give him Gaia's helmet, because when he's attacked, he would get more magic defense, right? So, but of note, as infantry, he doesn't have very high magic defense, so Gaia's helmet would not be a great one for him. So overall, I would say Vampire Mask is the best, because it gives plus defense, which helps keep his troops alive, and then it has the chance to apply the debuff of 20% less defense. But if you don't have Chief's helmet, you could go with Reaper's helm, Chief's helmet, can't go wrong with the other ones. if you don't have a vampire mask. Alright, so that's it for helmets. And finally, accessory. Long story short, any attack accessory will work at the SSR level. You know, give him Slayer's emblem, give him whatever. A pretty good one for him would be Force Necklace for the chance to apply that fixed damage. It's not guaranteed fixed damage, but it's not a bad choice for Lanford. But if we're talking about the absolute best accessory for him, it's kind of hard to say, in all honesty, because, you know, he could use even Overlord's Badge, right, for immunity to a lot of debuffs. But yeah, long story short, give him any kind of plus attack accessory and he'll be happy. You can't go wrong with any of these. Alright, so that pretty much covers his gear. And the very last thing I should mention is the enchant that he would use. Okay? And Lanford is one of those characters where you probably expect that he'll take some hits. So, because he's likely to tank hits, as I would say his best enchant is Full Moon. Right? He could use Rough Sea, don't get me wrong, right? Because Rough Sea gives plus 10% attack when you're attacking and 15% damage reduction. But if you're going to be using shooting and you're attacking at 2 range, you're not taking any damage in that sense. So I would say Rough Sea is not his best enchant, and thus that makes Full Moon the best one for him. So that's all I wanted to say about Lanford, and I hope you found this video useful. And on that note, Nitro out.